bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to the broadcast. Hope you're having a great day wherever you are and whatever you may be doing. With you as always, this is your ever so humble host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. If you're not real sure where that is, don't feel too bad about it. We're close to Oak Ridge, we're close to Knoxville, and unless you're from around here, that's probably about as good as it's going to get for my explanation of our location. At any rate, let's go ahead and get into today's show topics, shall we? Before we really get going, I would like to remind everyone that Tap Into the Truth also is broadcast on Blog Talk Radio on Sundays. It's a unique show. It's operated and done differently. The format's a little different. I'm trying to encourage you to check out both here and there. Give you a reason to listen. Occasionally there's some level of overlap because the audience just isn't the same. But most of the time I try to keep everything completely fresh. This particular upcoming Sunday we will be joined by Miss Brenda Leonard, one of the candidates seeking to primary Lamar Alexander in the upcoming senatorial election here in Tennessee. Miss Leonard is seeking the Republican nomination. We have in the past also had State Representative Joe Carr, and we've had Mr. Danny Page on a couple of times, and you can probably find those shows in the archives if you are interested in checking that out. So if you are a voter here in Tennessee, or if you're just interested to hear what the Tennessee politics are looking like at the moment, I highly recommend you go ahead and check out the archive shows, and be sure to tune in at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the Blog Talk Tap Into the Truth link and hear what Miss Leonard has to say. And also, in the second hour, we'll be joined by Diane Sorey. She has recently written a couple of op-ed pieces that are very apropos, and one of which applies to one of tonight's topics here, and the other completely unrelated. I'm not even going to go near it tonight, so that all that will be fresh for Sunday's show. So please, if you have the time and have the opportunity, check it out. Again, that's Tap Into the Truth over at blogtalkradio.com. We start at 3 p.m. Eastern, and we're on until 5. So check it out, please. On the topic of Tennessee politics, and somewhat related to that, some headlines that broke today. First and foremost, involving the senatorial races. The aforementioned State Representative Joe Carr today announced that he's had a big, sudden uptick in his campaign contributions. In fact, it was actually back on Tuesday afternoon that Republican Joe Carr announced fourth quarter fundraising totals for his primary challenge to Senator Lamar Alexander, and highlighted a dramatic surge in contributions over the previous quarter. Now, that report goes just directly to Nashville, the election commissions. So it took till today for this to really get out there and in the mainstream. But the report initially was published on Tuesday as well. But it's just taken a little time for the news to get out. Unless you're in Nashville or the Murfreesboro area, you hear this a day or two after the fact, typically. At any rate, in the FEC filing due at the end of the month, Carr's campaign will report raising $250,000, including contributions from over 1,000 new donors, in the fourth quarter of 2013. Now, this, of course, the surge in campaign donations, the Carr campaign, has coincided with deteriorating poll numbers for Senator Lamar Alexander. In fact, a recent Vanderbilt University poll showed a staggering 20% decline in Senator Alexander's approval rating among voters who identified with the Tea Party. No surprise there. And an overall rating under 50%. The lowest number of any statewide elected official in Tennessee. Other publicly released polling has shown that Senator Alexander receives only 46% of the vote in the Republican primary, a remarkably low number for a candidate who is well known to voters after a 40-year career in Tennessee politics. Now, if you're not familiar with Lamar Alexander, then you're obviously not from the state of Tennessee. If you are in Tennessee, you know Lamar Alexander. He has been the president of the University of Tennessee. He was a 2-term governor. He has served as the U.S. Secretary of Education. And, of course, he has run for president in the past. Did not make the cut during the primary purposes. Now, he is seeking a 3rd term as U.S. Senator. The problem with the election and re-election of Lamar Alexander here in Tennessee has to do with the fact that this is a state that up until the last, 12 years or so, had been blue to purple when you look at the blue versus red state scenario. The Democrats controlled the state legislature for a little better than over 100 years. It wasn't until the previous, not the last election cycle, but the election cycle before that, that the Republicans managed to hold a majority in the Senate. I believe the number, I don't have it in front of me, but I think the number was 112. 112 years of Democratic control in the legislature. Now, we'd flipped out and changed out governors, and fortunately for a reasonable part of that, the Democrats that held sway as the majority within the party tended to be what's referred to these days as blue dog Democrats, which means they were, at the very least, somewhat conservative on financial issues, and they kind of went their separate ways on social issues. So the state faces the consequences of Democratic control, but it wasn't just widespread, rampant, out-of-control liberalism. There was plenty of liberal ideology, and things were passed like TennCare, but it wasn't completely unchecked like you see in places, Detroit, for example. At any rate, Lamar Alexander has this long resume and has been a public servant, but the problem going on now is over the course of the last several voting cycles, basically ever since the big debt ceiling debate where Mr. Occupier himself, Barack Hussein Obama, took a contingent of senators out to dinner to have a discussion. Since that night, both Lamar Alexander and Bob Corker have voted in line with what Obama has wanted, despite the wishes and the will of the constituency here in the state of Tennessee. That's an issue. You cannot ignore the will of the people who put you in office and expect to be reelected. Now, Lamar has huge advantages. regardless. He is an incumbent. Incumbents are difficult to beat. He has a huge war chest because he has been doing this for a while now. And, of course, there are several people in the race to try and primary him. If you could whittle this down to just one or two challengers before the primary actually takes place, there's a chance of cutting into that and taking Lamar out. The problem is that if you're receiving 48%, 49% positive rankings in your polling at this point, you still have to say, okay, that's a number that means more than 50% are against you. You should be worried. If there was only one other challenger. As I just mentioned in the intro today, there are 3 different challengers that either have or is about to make an appearance on Tap Into the Truth. There are other challengers as well that I have not heard anything back as I've reached out to. And I've even reached out to Lamar Alexander himself to try to get him to come on. So far, no response as of yet. And I've tried a couple of times in the interest of offering a fair opportunity to come on and tell his side of the story. Because, make no mistake, I respect the man's resume. I appreciate the things that he's done for the state, but I do feel much like the Tea Party does in this particular instance, and a lot of other just honest-to-goodness conservatives, that Lamar has failed to represent Tennessee values in how he's been voting. That's a major concern. Now, should we primary a Republican and put a new person in just because he's a conservative, risking being defeated by a Democrat? Giving up one of the seats that we need to take if we're going to get Republican control, and then hopefully conservative control of the U.S. Senate? I mean, that's the age-old question, isn't it? Some people will tell you, no, don't mess with an incumbent, don't do this. But there is a stronger and stronger turn against Lamar, and while you see it amongst the conservatives, don't make the mistake of thinking that the liberals in this state won't pounce on that weakness if he does survive the primary race. Now, all the political insiders still say that Joe Carr has the best chance of unseating Lamar Alexander in a primary if it comes to that. But the true test isn't what the political insiders say. It isn't what the polls say going in. It comes down to what the voters say on Election Day. So I'm looking forward to this to see how this ends up. Based on the conversations that I've had this far, I definitely like the majority of candidates who are challenging Lamar. And I do believe that it's time for Lamar to keep his promise, because when he ran the first time for Senate, he promised then that he would only serve 2 terms and he would be done. He's running for a 3rd term, so he's broken that promise. And he has not voted in accordance to the will of his constituents the last few times. He's been playing politics. He's been going along with what Boehner has wanted. Not that Boehner should have any particular influence over the Senate, because, well, he's the House leader, isn't he? Ultimately, though, it comes down to a question of who do you want to represent you? That should always be how you cast your vote, no matter what you think about their chances of winning. Now, folks will argue, no, you need to get behind the best candidate that's got a chance to win. Otherwise, you just hand it to the other people. But if enough people see things the way you do, then the way you vote actually can make the difference. I am afraid, however, that in this particular race, that the remaining 50+% of Republican primary voters will most likely split quite decisively. Representative Carr may take a huge slice of that. He has a political machine and a war chest of his own, and this announcement about this sudden influx of an additional $250,000, that's big news. That will be helpful, and he's got connections within the state. He knows how to run a political campaign. We'll see. But I do think that the populist appeal of people like Miss Leonard and Mr. Danny Page will attract a high enough percentage of votes away from Representative Carr, and will probably, even if it's just by the skin of his teeth, help Lamar Alexander to survive the primary challenge. Now, that's what I see. That's what I'm concerned about. Now, if Lamar gets the Republican nomination again, it's certainly not the end of the world, because Lamar's not a bad guy, but he has always been a get along kind of guy. He's not really ever stood on principles at any point in time. He has been kind of a stick your pinky in the wind and see which way it's blowing. He has core beliefs. He is relatively conservative based on what I've seen, not only in his statements but also in his actions. But the concerns of how he has voted since that dinner with Barack Hussein Obama, they're significant. And I, for one, would like to see him primaried out with someone who can still win in the general election. Is that Representative Joe Carr? Possibly. Is it Danny Page? Maybe. Is it Miss Brenda Leonard? Possibly. I just want the most conservative person there. And I got to tell you, I haven't had a chance to talk to Miss Leonard yet directly, but I have heard her in a couple of other interviews, and she sounds like she's reasonably down to earth. Having looked at her bio and her qualifications, I think she would be an excellent candidate for the position. We'll see how that plays out. But I have had the opportunity to talk with Mr. Danny Page a couple of times, and I have to tell you that having that conversation with him, I like what he has to say a lot. He is a common sense, average, everyday Tennessean / American who understands what it means to be on this side of what Washington does. You know, he's not particularly affluent. He has had to work to earn a living and still does so. He has a family that he tries to take care of. And I know it sounds like I'm giving an endorsement, and I'd have to say right now, based on the conversations I've had, I would have to lean towards Mr. Page. On a personal level. But again, like I said, I haven't had that chance to talk to Miss Leonard yet, and I want to give everyone a fair opportunity. So I'm not ready to make any endorsements in this race just yet. I really don't feel like all would be lost if Lamar does win the primary either. I would become very concerned if we lose this seat to the Democrats. And on another related note, and I've really gone on a bit longer with this than I had intended to, so I will go ahead and move along. We actually had a Democrat formally announce entering this particular race. This came out today. It's actually a Knoxville, Tennessee attorney by the name of Terry Adams. Excuse me. He came out touting his status as a political outsider now in his bid for the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate. Adams, who was a quartermaster in the Navy before going to college and law school, told reporters in Nashville today that he wants to champion veterans' issues and to keep what he calls a career politician from holding the seat for another 6 years. Obviously a reference to Lamar Alexander. Adams runs a 7-attorney law firm and owns a title company in Knoxville. He told reporters in Nashville on Friday that he was motivated to run in part to avoid a repeat of the 2012 primary won by an anti-gay candidate who was quickly disavowed by the Democratic Party. So it was a bit of a debacle. And to this point, Democrats really hadn't come out. To be completely honest, I haven't been watching the Democratic side of this race, but to the best of my knowledge, and it's entirely possible that I could be wrong on this, I believe he's the first Democrat to come out bidding for this position. My first reaction, though, after having spoken to State Representative Carr and to Danny Page and about to speak to Miss Leonard, that it's awfully presumptuous of him to just assume Lamar Alexander is going to survive the primary. Now, arrogance among liberals isn't something particularly new. I'm sure he would very much like to pretend like there are no other candidates in this race. Much like Representative Carr basically came out and said during his interview on our show, basically acted as if there really wasn't any other candidate, just him challenging Lamar. So anybody can say they're a candidate, but you really have to be one. Of course, again, you can hit the archives at the show and hear that for yourself. What I find interesting here, though, is the fact that Lamar Alexander is facing way more of a challenge than he wants to let on. The Democrats now are starting to take shape. I'm sure there will be more people come out and have something to say. More people throw their hat in the ring to challenge on the Democratic side. And like I said, I'm not 100% sure if there aren't a few more people already in the race. But this was the first big announcement that I've heard, so normally I do keep my ear to the ground. I don't recall hearing any other Democrats throwing their names in the ring yet. Given how things played out in the last election cycle, they probably would be fairly well suited with somebody with a solid background coming out early and taking a lead. But regardless of how that works out, ultimately, I'm saying ultimately a lot tonight, aren't I? Forgive me. Still, this is something that's going to be determined on Election Day. I, for one, would like to see staunch conservatism put in play. Someone that's going to actually represent the people of the state of Tennessee the way they want and deserve to be represented. And that means standing up on principle. I'm afraid Lamar has not been doing that. So I would like to see one of these other candidates win in the primary. And I would love to see one of these candidates that's not interested in becoming a career politician. That would be my first preference. Regardless of who it is, I still will support Lamar in the general if he wins the primary, because I'm afraid of what the alternative could end up being. With that having been said, another quick headline, and I know I promised these would be quick, and they weren't, so apologies. But one more quick headline from local Tennessee news. Excuse me. That cough that won't go away. It still won't go away. This one not actually in the realm of the political, unless you count the fact that there was a court case involved. Pastor Andrew Hamblin of the Tabernacle Church of God in La Follette, Tennessee, was exonerated by a grand jury this past Wednesday, clearing him of charges related to the possession of illegal, deadly snakes, deemed by authorities to be dangerous to the public. See, Hamblin, 22 years old, in case you were wondering, he's appeared on National Geographic's Snake Salvation, which happens to be one of these crazy reality shows. In this case, it's about preachers that handle serpents. See, he found himself in the legal crosshairs when the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency cited him back in November of 2013 for possessing venomous snakes. The government stepped in to seize 53 snakes after authorities went to Hamblin's home and asked if he had any of the deadly animals inside. While the pastor said no, he did admit to housing them at the church. The preacher then took authorities to the Tabernacle Church of God, where the snakes were collected. Hamblin was subsequently charged with misdemeanor possession, Class 1 wildlife, a penalty that involved the possession of wildlife that could be dangerous to humans. He pleaded not guilty. While Hamblin and his followers have said that snake handling is part of their religious practice, prosecutor Lori Phillips Jones joined authorities in arguing that the possession of these deadly serpents is a public safety issue. After a judge last month heard arguments from both sides, the case was sent to a grand jury. It's a major step, Hamblin was quoted as saying to the Chattanooga Times Free Press. After the case concluded, quote, "Today was a major victory, not only for serpent-handling people, but for Christians everywhere." And on Thursday, the church wrote 2 simple words on its Facebook page in reaction to the decision. Great news. Now, Matt Cameron, a spokesman for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, told Religion News Service that the agency acted correctly in seizing the snakes and that they will not be returned to the church. See, as a matter of law here in the state of Tennessee, serpent handling has been banned since 1947. Right or wrong, that's still the law. Now, what I don't understand about this case is how he was exonerated. The charges as they are written, he's clearly guilty of. Now, should it be a crime? No. I think during the courses of religious freedom, Excuse me. Suddenly just yawning all of a sudden. Yeah. Please forgive me. As I was saying, though, to the issue of religious freedom, even though I don't particularly agree with it or feel particularly comfortable with the idea, and certainly would not participate in the practice myself, mostly because, well, snakes kind of creep me out. I mean, they're kind of cool from a distance. I like watching them, but they're not exactly cute and cuddlies. So I'll stick with puppies and cats if that's all the same to you. If you're a reptile lover, no offense intended. I've got nothing against snakes. They just kind of creep me out. But the point still lies the fact that he should be free to practice his faith. It's incredibly dangerous. Snake handlers, however, do not feel as if it is. In fact, most of them survive multiple bites over time anyway. In truth, there are also those that aren't necessarily on the up and up. And I'm not accusing anybody in particular here, but we know that some people take up the serpents, and their serpents are milked on a regular basis, so even if there is the bite, there's little to no venom involved in what's going on, so they're relatively safe. That happens. Now, for those that legitimately do this, another practice that is taken on by certain groups of snake handlers is also the drinking of strychnine. I saw on one of these documentaries one time, and it sticks out in my mind, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see it or not. I believe it was on the Discovery Channel. It's been a few years since I saw it, but this one guy that was being interviewed, they were talking about the difference between handling the snakes and drinking the strychnine. And he's like, well, you can be bit by a snake and live through it regardless. But if you're drinking strychnine, you better be right with God. And the first thing that pops into my mind is, dang straight you better be, because you're probably about to meet him. But, these people take this aspect of their faith to a level that most people are unwilling to. And I applaud that. I'm still not going to jump on board with it. I'm not going to be doing this. But when you have a demonstration of faith, and you're basically really only endangering yourself, you've got the right to put yourself in danger. It doesn't matter how many nanny state laws that these states want to put in place. You do not have the right to endanger someone else. You do have the right to put yourself in danger. Again, as long as it doesn't create a hazard for someone else. It's a bit of a stretch to try and make this about public safety. Because unless these snakes suddenly get loose and they're just attacking and biting everyone in the church, then the public in general is not in any kind of danger. So, should snake handling be banned in the state? I don't think so. I mean, don't get me wrong. Still, I understand the ideology and the thought process involved in trying to protect people from venomous snakes. For most folks, you would think that would not even really be an issue. People do typically tend to instinctively stay away from them. These folks just don't. They latch on to one particular phrase in the Bible and believe that to demonstrate their faith, that's what they should do. Not all that different from the Church of God folks that believe in speaking in tongues, and I believe those are the Pentecostals, isn't it? I'm going to keep on till I end up offending somebody, and I'm really not trying to, so please understand the point I'm trying to make. The reason we have different denominations is because groups of people see parts of the Bible as being more important than others. I mean, if that wasn't the case, then we probably wouldn't even have the Bible, really. We'd just stay with the Torah. Only for Christians, that would be problematic. But we have these different denominations because they see certain things as having profound meaning and should continue to be practiced. Simply a means of demonstrating their faith. That's all. And there's nothing wrong with any of it. It's not any different for the Church of Latter-day Saints back in the day when the what's the phrasing they use? Plural marriage, I believe, is the acceptable term these days. When plural marriage was still one of the tenets of the Mormon Church, and of course still is based on some of the offshoots from the Mormon Church. People that still consider themselves to be Mormon, but they are not part of the Church of Latter-day Saints, which is the official Mormon Church. You know, they believe that to be an expression of their faith as well. Should states ban polygamy? Well, I think there is a legitimate reason to look at banning marriages in cases like, oh, I'm a traveling salesman and I spend equal amounts of time in 3 different cities, and so I have perpetrated fraudulent, easy for me to say, fraudulent relationships with 3 women in these cities, and all of them think I'm married to them. None of them know about the others. Yeah, there should probably be some type of criminal redress to that type of behavior, because at the very least it's fraud. But the plural marriage situation is not polygamy in that sense. And my attitude on this is pretty libertarian, I suppose, in so much as I think that as long as you know what you're getting into, you're walking in knowing that there are these other people involved and that you're going to be part of a family where not only you are a focal point of this husband, but that he will have other wives, and therefore he will have children with these other wives, and he will have these dedications and ties to these people, then you have to be able to accept that, be willing to live with it. And it's a lot harder than it would sound. And for those of us who don't grow up in a polyamory situation and understanding the plural marriage situation, it sounds pretty hard to begin with. But to the state, should a government come in and tell you who can be in your household, I don't see that as being anybody's business but theirs. And I don't think that polygamy laws should apply to plural marriages, because the polygamy laws, even though they were essentially designed to try and put a stop to that, were sold under the bill of the fraudulent relationships that some men felt like they had to have, while they were existing in these multiple lives. You have a dual life over here and a dual life over here, and the 2 women didn't know anything at all about each other, or in some cases 3 or 4 women. If they don't know anything at all about each other, yeah, okay, you've committed fraud and you have bamboozled and done bad things to these women. But if the women know each other and they know what's going on and they're on board with it, they need to be willing to live with the consequences that come from that. And, if they're get involved and then later on find out that they just can't handle that kind of stuff, well, then that's on them. And that's personal choice, personal responsibility time. Just because people don't feel comfortable with it doesn't mean there's no place for it in society. I'm not telling you to go do it. I'm just telling you, I don't think it's the role of government to tell somebody else not to do it. The less government is in our homes and in our bedrooms, the better off we all are. Period. What's going on under your roof? Your business. What's going on under my roof? My business. What's going on under my neighbor's roof? Unless it spills out into the yard and it just gets out there, well, that's none of mine. I'm not particularly concerned about it. So, there you go. I really don't understand what the issue keeps being, though. Why is snake handling banned in this state? Well, because obviously a few too many people were getting hurt. Does that mean their faith wasn't strong enough? Maybe. I don't know. I did promise this would be quick, didn't I? Unfortunately, I picked these topics because I feel like they're worthy of some discussion. In this particular case, this is just flat out standard. I'm talking about my philosophy on the issue. And if you agree, great. If you disagree, hey, let me know. I'm willing to listen to opposing views. In the meanwhile, we do have some serious topics I'd like to get to. A couple of them very interesting. Situation, of course, is just wild and out of control with this media coverage and the hypocrisy thereof of the big bridge scandal for Chris-Christie. Also, wanted to talk about this situation going on in Riverton, Wyoming. If you have not heard about it yet, and it would not be surprising this unless you are seriously involved in checking out conservative news websites, you probably haven't yet. You will probably hear about this in the upcoming week because it seems like the mainstream media is finally kind of catching up with this story. The EPA and a couple of other government agencies have essentially just handed over this town to a couple of tribes of Indians. Just giving it over to a reservation. We'll go into the details of that when we come back from this upcoming break as well. But before we even do that, I want to touch on this new drug that's making crystal meth look like Pez candy, and it's crocodile. I've been meaning to try and get onto that topic for several months now, and it just seems like it keeps falling by the wayside. Other stuff pops up, things are more important, time constraints, all that wonderful stuff. But more and more stories are popping up, and I'm still hearing less and less. Haven't heard any mainstream media stories really focusing on this yet. And we need to be aware of it because it is here in the States now, and it is serious. In the meanwhile, let's go ahead and take that break I was talking about, and when we get back, we'll continue. Stay with us. We will be right back. Thanks.
of the world.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this new drug that, well, it's not really all that new at this point, but it's new in the United States. It has been around for a little while now. Still not getting very much mainstream media coverage, even though it is in the States now. And came across this article. This one was over at the website Mr. Conservative, but cross-referenced it in a couple other places as well. The reason I mentioned this particular one is because there's also this video that actually shows a crocodile cookhouse, and it shows this woman that's addicted and shows some of the issues. What makes this drug a real issue is that its effects to the user is similar to heroin, but it's much cheaper, and it's really not much different in a lot of ways than the issue with crystal meth, in so much as that it's really easy to manufacture and make, and it has a lot to do with taking just random stuff. Well, recently a woman slipped on down to Mexico, and the Mexican health officials have officially reported that the young woman who injected this flesh-rotting drug, crocodile, into her genitals is an American and not a Mexican citizen. So that's what gets it back to being newsworthy. Now, Mexican authorities were reporting that contrary to earlier news reports, the young woman is from Houston, Texas, and became addicted to the drug in the States. Now, she acquired the problem with crocodile in Houston, not in Puerto Vallarta, according to a doctor that was treating her, and also the head of the Council on Addictions in the western Mexican state of Jalisco. Now, this drug, you heard me right. If you're not familiar with it, it is a flesh-eating disease. Like I said, I mentioned specifically Mr. Conservative in this case. And you can go to www.mr, that's just mrconservative.com, and you can find the story here. And they've got a video along with some absolutely scary pictures of people who've been using it for a while. Now, most of you have seen the effects of crystal meth and how it just devastates the body after any particular amount of long-term use. This story became an issue because the Mexicans, in this particular issue, didn't want anybody thinking it was one of their people that was actually suffering from this addiction, or that it had anything to do with Mexican culture. They have their own issues, of course. Now, if you haven't been catching these stories, I mean, and they are all over the place now. This drug, it's called the poor man's heroin because, again, like I mentioned before, the effects of the drug are similar. Now, the first statistical information of this crocodile comes from the Soviet Union. And there's just so very little known about this other than the fact that there's the impurities, the stuff that gets cut with, And they'll put just about anything in this. It collapses the blood vessels in the body, and so people are losing fingers, toes, legs. It will attack different parts of the body. And it's very difficult to for anybody to understand why, if you would see these effects or start feeling these effects, why you would get involved. This has been spreading out for a while from Russia through Europe. It's hit the States now. There are headlines at these different websites and European newspapers. Crocodile, the drug that eats junkies, and things like that. This is essentially a homemade heroin substitute, and it really does just destroy people. At any rate, if you haven't already heard about crocodile, and it's spelled with a K, then by all means, please look into it and keep an eye out for people that you know, that you care about. Make sure that they do not become exposed to this crap. I mean, regular drugs that aren't this destructive are bad enough. But these pictures, I cannot adequately describe them to you. Please just go ahead and look them up. Just run a quick Google search. The keyword is in the show description. Look up crocodile. It's just bad news, folks. Bad news. I'm going to take another quick break, and when we get back, we will have a brief discussion about states' rights, and more importantly, how Oklahoma, at least their state house, has passed a bill nullifying Obamacare. Not that you would know it from watching our mainstream media here in the States. And then we'll hit the bigger topics of the day. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
What you wanted. I know what you
right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Just a quick reminder, the music you hear on this show during the breaks are all provided by me through a service known as Magnatune. It is a podcast-safe version of music. We pay a small fee, and royalties are paid to the artist involved. Provides this service to these artists who all are independent, which means they do not have the backing of a major label. So they're going about it the hard way. And there's just something about that I like. So, that's what we're doing. The upside, completely podcast safe. All licensing agreements are squared away, and the artists are getting their cut for the use. Plus, they're getting a lot of exposure, not only from this show, but from the other podcasters out there that are utilizing the service as well. So, if you're podcasting and you're looking for some indie artists or just for some podcast safe music, let me take this opportunity to recommend you check out Magnatune.com. All right, let's go ahead and get into this next story so we can get into the main story, shall we? Just very briefly, I'm going to go into the fact that the Oklahoma House has passed a bill nullifying Obamacare. But the big story is the fact that you really haven't heard a peep if you've been watching the ABC, CBS, the Alphabet Soup networks, and their awesome news coverage. See, lately there have been several different states that are on track to nullify Obamacare. South Carolina's Senate is voting on it this month and is expected to pass. Representatives from Georgia and Missouri have introduced similar bills in their houses. 10 more states are expected to follow suit. There has been a decent amount of media coverage on these states' nullification efforts. For whatever reason, though, when Oklahoma's House overwhelmingly passed an Obamacare nullification bill last March, only a handful of news outlets even reported it. Is there a reason why? I don't know. But this from the New American. Standing as a bulwark of liberty, the Oklahoma House of Representatives passed a bill protecting citizens of the Sooner State from the unconstitutional provisions of Obamacare. By a vote of 72 to 20, the State House of Representatives passed House Bill 1021, a bill that, if signed into law, would stop the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, at the borders of the sovereign state of Oklahoma. The bill's primary proponent is State Representative Mike Ritz, a Republican from a little place called Broken Arrow. A board-certified family practice physician and surgeon, he's particularly aware of the threat to liberty and good health care posed by Obamacare. In an exclusive conversation with the New American, Dr. Ritzy reported that the debate in the House was passionate and included testimony from a partially paralyzed colleague who stands to lose his medical coverage as a result of the mandates of Obamacare. Ritz praised the Speaker of the State House of Representatives, T.W. Shannon, a Republican from Lawton, for resisting political pressure and placing the bill on the calendar, allowing it to be voted on by the body of the House. Apart from protecting citizens from the oppressive provisions of Obamacare, Rich said that his bill will protect Oklahomans from becoming subjects to a tyrannical, centralized government determined to consolidate all power in Washington. Recognized Obamacare for what it is, a federal attack on life, liberty, and property. Now, the supremacy clause in the Constitution is usually Obamacare supporters' argument for Obamacare. The Oklahoma House voted otherwise. It's the argument against it. There is no provision in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution where the states delegated to Congress the authority to make a citizen purchase health care or pay a fine. Ritz went on to say, the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is an example of federal overreach, and my legislation will authorize the state, via the will of the people, to ignore it and ban the enforcement of it. They fail to understand how the country is supposed to operate, Ritz added. As Alexander Hamilton wrote in the Federalist Papers, number 33, it expressly confines this supremacy to laws made pursuant to the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton got it right. Congress and the Supreme Court got it wrong. Rissy's reading of the Constitution is the same as that of the Founding Fathers. The Supremacy Clause, as some wrongfully call it, of Article 6 does not declare that laws passed by the federal government are the supreme law of the land. Period. What it does say is that the laws of the United States made in pursuance of the Constitution are the supreme law of the land. In pursuance thereof, not in violation thereof. None of the provisions of Obamacare are permissible under any enumerated powers given to Congress in the Constitution. Therefore, they were not made in pursuant to the Constitution, and they are not the supreme law of the land. Seems like a pretty compelling argument to me. The Oklahoma House passed this bill nearly a year ago. It's time to end the media blackout. The more states that learn that they too have the power to stop Obamacare, the sooner we can put a stop to this nightmare. So please, if you're in a position to help spread the word, please do so. Oklahoma's done it. They should not, nor can they, be the only state to do it. Let's get the word out, and let's talk about it. Because here's one of the big things here in the States. Now, if you happen to be listening from outside of the United States, maybe this seems like an argument that you either have no interest in or you just don't understand. And in either case, probably comes across as being pretty boring to you. Excuse me. But one of the reasons that there are constitutionalists here in the United States is because we have seen our federal government move away from the confines placed on it by our Constitution. Everybody wants to talk about changing with the times and moving forward and being progressive. But these progressive movements haven't been about helping the people. And it's not about being for the children. What it is about putting more authority, more power in a centralized federal government so that no one can challenge their authority. Our Constitution intended from the beginning to be a hamper, a dampening agent to that kind of movement. But the American people have become disinterested in what their government was doing. They voted, well, at least some of us voted, sent people to D.C. and expected them to just do the job the way it's supposed to be done. But we are now 3 generations into American citizens where less than 10% actually know what the Constitution was intended to do. When asked over the Obamacare issue when it was in the legislative states, when asked directly, Nancy Pelosi, then Speaker of the House, Nancy Mimi Pelosi, was asked point blank, where do you have the authority to pass this law in the Constitution? She laughed and asked rhetorically, are you kidding? That's the attitude these people have. A lot of them really don't seem to understand what the power structure is and how it's supposed to be challenged. If a law isn't constitutional, you do not have to wait for the laws, for the court system to decide if it's constitutional or not. Now, the way the legal system is set up, if you're going to bring a case before the Supreme Court, you must have standing. And in order to have standing in the eyes of the court, you must be someone who has had damage done to you. You must have felt injury of some kind before you can sue the federal government over the NSA spying on your phone records. You must be able to prove that the NSA has used your phone records against you in some way. You must show damages. You felt injury. That part is true. That's the way our legal system works. But the part that everyone seems to overlook, that they really don't seem to understand, is the fact that if something isn't legal to have been done in the first place, you don't have to wait on the courts to make a decision. You act. It ends. Congress has the authority to demand it end. They don't need the president to sign off on it. They don't need the courts to agree with them. The one thing that they really don't understand is what the House was doing over the Obamacare fight earlier this year. Well, I guess it was last year now. It is January after all. But what they were doing in this last round before the Obamacare government shutdown issue took place here, the House controls the purse strings. The NSA can't continue to do jack if the House defunds them. And the House can defund them at any point in time. They can just say, oops, no more money for you. And if they do that, well, the Senate and the President and the Supreme Court can all get together, and it doesn't mean jack. Because that is one of the enumerated powers that was given specifically to the House of Representatives. Now, people say, no, you can't just do that, and there will be retribution, and these people will do bad things back, and blah, 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 yakety smackety. Well, there comes a time where you still have to stand on principles, regardless of what the ramifications might be. Every single little squishy-spined Republican that doesn't want to attack the Democrats head-on deserves to lose. Because what they're doing is they're talking about playing a strategy to try to win over more voters. In the process of playing this little game, what they're really doing is looking like cowards. They're losing the support of the base. But worse than that, they're playing the game. And right now, we don't need people in Washington, D.C. playing the game. We need people in Washington, D.C. leading, providing leadership, providing solutions, offering them, taking them to the table, fighting for them, going to the mat for the American people, taking the steps that Rand Paul and Ted Cruz did, and standing up in front of everyone and making the point for as long as they could stand to make it. That's what we need. We need common sense returned. We don't need people like Sheila Lee Jackson from Texas, who thinks she's so very important and did such a great thing on the 50th anniversary of the War on Poverty, wanting the government to officially change how it refers to welfare. More so-called progressive crapola. We'll control the argument by controlling the language. While you could be against welfare because now it's gotten such a negative incantation in the English language, you can't possibly be against transitional living funds. It's a little bit complicated and highfalutin for the folks that would be receiving it, isn't it, Miss Sheila Lee Jackson? She's relatively inconsequential, but she is good for a laugh. She's one of the few people in the House that makes Nancy Pelosi look almost sane. She is entertaining. But she also demonstrates quite clearly the type of mindset that the so-called progressives want the average American to have. In fact, they don't just want this in America, by the way. They're focusing here because they think they've won in other places where they haven't garnered complete control. They're pretty close to it. That's what they think. They believe that. They've come pretty far here, sadly. I hate to admit it. I hate to say it out loud because it scares the crap out of me when I turn around and I see how close we are to complete and total collapse of our society. I don't think we're over the precipice or we're over the edge, but I do look around and I see that we are so very close. It's no wonder why there are people that are building their little bunkers in the woods underground and loading up with as much ammunition and firearms and freeze-dried food as they can. You think the preppers are crazy? You think they're part of the tinfoil cat crowd? You're going to be wishing you were one of them if we can't turn this around soon. Those are going to be the folks that are going to have their stuff together, and they're going to be able to last a while. In fact, the people that will be hit the hardest are going to be those little Nancy boy wussified liberals who are all touchy-feely and want to give the world a hug and give it a Coke and a smile and say, hey, everything's great and we can solve all the world's problems with love. Love's not going to get you too far when the only two commodities left on the planet are food and bullets. And that's what a collapse here is going to look like. If that doesn't sound like a good idea to you, it sure doesn't sound like one to me. then maybe we need to start working together to try and reverse that trend. What do you say? That starts with states' rights. That starts with the Constitution being put back in place. It starts with people having to take personal responsibility for their actions, for their lives, for their decisions, for their choices, and stop blaming everyone else and stop expecting everyone else to pick up the tab. You want free contraceptives? Too bad. Nothing is free. This government has no money of its own. In order for it to pay for something for you, it has to take the money from somebody else. Period. And it's a camel nose under the tent. You want the federal government paying for your contraceptives? Then you are a short hop, skip, and a jump. It may not seem that short, but trust me, once it gets started, it is a very short hop, skip, and a jump away from having the federal government licensing what you can and cannot do in the exchange of bodily fluids. You do not want the government in your bedroom. I don't want the government in mine. And in fact, unless there's a very narrow set of circumstances applied here, I probably don't want you involved in my bedroom activities, and I certainly don't want to be involved in yours. And I'd say that's probably the way you would prefer it. But once you open the door to the government paying for contraceptives, well, the government thinks it has the right to tell you everything the minute they start paying for any part of something. We're going to give you money for highways? Well, you have to set the minimum speed limit here. Actually, I guess that should be the maximum speed limit, but you understand what I'm saying. We pay for your highways. We tell you what the speed limit is. We pay for a park. We tell you how many people you have to hire to maintain it. And no, we won't be paying for that part of it. But if you want to keep getting our money for this, then you'll have to do what we say. You want to keep receiving federal funds for education? Well, then you have to adopt Common Core. And you only have two options. A, do what the federal government says, or B, don't take the money. That one's much harder for any level of government, though, isn't it? I mean, so many people in different constituencies would feel betrayed if you didn't take the money that was being offered, regardless of what the consequence is. People anymore, at least here, I keep making these exceptions because I understand there are people that listen to this show, especially here on Spreaker, outside of the United States. So I can't speak to your experiences. I'm not there. But I am here. I'm speaking to the American experience. So when I make a generalized statement, please understand it's generalized to the United States. But there are way too many people here that they don't put any thought into consequences until after it's too late to do anything about them. So that's where we're at with it. We gotta right the ship, straighten the course. Every state has the authority to do this. I'm still a big proponent of Mark Levin's idea in his Liberty Amendments book having the states come together and make some of these changes and just leave the federal government out of the equation. Force the federal government back to constitutional limitations. The Constitution was designed to keep the power in the hands of the people. There's just way too many people that don't want to be bothered with it. Eventually, your apathy and your ignorance is going to cost everyone. Even the ones that were paying attention, even the ones who were fighting hard to protect your rights. Your apathy and your ignorance is going to cost everyone here their individual liberty. Stop being a mushroom. Don't be left in the dark and covered with BS. Alright, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to jump into the Chris-Christie thing.
Money
All right, we are back. Thanks for staying with us. Just a quick reminder, too. This coming Sunday, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this show will be broadcasting on blogtalkradio.com. Please check it out. We will have Miss Brenda Leonard, a candidate for the Republican nomination for Senator for the state of Tennessee, challenging Lamar Alexander in the primary, along with a few other folks in the race. Also, tentatively, Michael Conley, the executive director of the United States Justice Foundation, will be on the 26th. He'll be on to discuss what the foundation's plans are for the upcoming year. And we'll hit on a couple of topical topics, meaning timely and of the essence, so to speak. In the process, we will be discussing veterans affairs currently and a few other pet peeve projects that the United States Justice Foundation works on. That having been said, please go ahead and check out tapintothetruth.com. Would love for you to go down near the bottom of the homepage and send me a message. Let me know what you think about the show. Let me know what you think about the website. Near the top of the homepage, there are a couple of little buttons where you can click on them, and it will take you to the Facebook page for the show, and it will take you to the Twitter account for the show. So by all means, please like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and give me some feedback. Still time to get your votes in for biggest stories of last year that received the least amount of media attention. So please, by all means, at the very least, give me your name and your submission to what you think that story is. And if you leave your name and you are a unique submission, I'll be very likely to mention you by name. So there you go. Now, let's get to the juicy stuff. I want to save the Riverton, Wyoming bit for the end because I've got a bit of a rant to go with that. So, if you don't want to hear the rant, then why are you listening? That's almost all I do on this broadcast. I have interesting interviews and I have conversations over at Blog Talk. Here, it's just me ranting. If you don't want to hear me rant, why are you still here? At any rate, let's get into this, shall we? Unless you've been living under a rock, and some people do, or maybe you might be living under a bridge. Unless you've been out of the loop and paid no attention to any kind of news over the last few days, then you are probably well aware of the fact that the George Washington Bridge was closed down, apparently as a form of retribution for a mayor who happened to be a Democrat, so don't know why you would be surprised a Democratic mayor wouldn't support a re-election bid of a Republican governor. But anyway, this seemed to be some type of retribution. An attempt to cause gridlock. An attempt to cause unhappiness. An attempt to just be childish and petty, quite honestly. Excuse me again. I've really got to do something about this cough. Now, this situation was further complicated by the fact that Chris Christie yesterday gave a ridiculously long press conference. Ran over 2 hours. And it really wasn't necessary, but it was political theater. Christie, who likes the limelight and who is really, no matter what he's saying, he's prepping himself to make a move to try to get the Republican nomination to run for president in the 2016 election cycle. You know, we've got the press working triple time to try and whitewash and protect Hillary's really awesome career opportunities, and to kind of polish up her resume a little bit and hope to try and make everyone forget about Benghazi. You know, they just don't seem to understand why Benghazi is still hanging around, and why the ghost of 4 dead Americans just won't seem to go very far away from Hillary. Why won't we let that go? They don't seem to get it. They really don't. They don't understand. Hillary herself, when she finally got around to testifying, made the statement, "At this point, what difference does it make?" The difference it makes, Hillary, is that it was your job. You were responsible for the security of each and every person that works for the State Department. And if you had somebody that was not in a secured location, a place that was not safe for them to be, and you had reasonable, rational intel, reason to be concerned about the safety, like, I don't know, somebody throwing explosives over the wall earlier in the year, officials in the area coming and telling the ambassador that things are dangerous, things are getting really hot. Yeah, just complete total dereliction of your duty and your responsibility. That's why we won't let it go. That's why you, Hillary Clinton, do not deserve to get to run for president. Now, obviously you can. Looks like you probably will. I know Lady Patriot Diane Sori keeps insisting that Hillary will not be the Democratic nomination. She has someone else that she believes actually will be the nominee. And this guy happens to be someone that actually makes de Blasio look like, you know, center right. So that's how far this guy is. We will see. Excuse me again. Because, I mean, there is this disturbing trend. More and more openly socialist, openly communist people are winning elections in areas where Democrats typically control the voting blocks. Got a city council person in Seattle. She's a crazy chica. She was out talking about why if a certain manufacturer decided to move the plant because they couldn't afford to meet the employees' demands there, that they should just take over the plant and make what they want and leave the company out in the cold because those guys in the offices don't make it happen. It's the workers on the floor that do. While, of course, the employees play a very important role, it's very important to remember that so does management. They're the ones that decide who gets to work there and not. Without them, whoever's working there now would have never been offered the position they had. They're the ones that go out and drum up new business. If you're working inside of a production facility, you don't have time to go out and make contacts and make sales and get contracts signed and bring capital into the company, which is where the paychecks come from, by the way. So this woman, openly socialist, openly an idiot, But she won election, and she did it by being straight up, flat, honest about it. De Blasio in New York just became mayor. This guy is so far to the left it makes Adolf Hitler look like he was a conservative. And for the record, the Nazis started out as a labor union and expanded to the National Socialist Party. The Nazis were leftists. Just FYI, for the folks that still don't know or understand that. I'm assuming most of the people that take the time to listen to this show and hang on this late into it are smart enough that they probably already know that. But, just in case somebody's randomly listening to this in the background while they do something else and maybe you didn't know, go ahead, look it up. National Socialist Party. That's the Nazis, baby. Hitler was a leftist. Which is what makes it even more ironical when these libs try and portray someone like George W. Bush as a Nazi. Say, oh, you're just a bunch of Nazis. Nope, we're on the wrong side of the political spectrum to be a Nazi. Sorry. That's not to say that they're not possibly someone that's moving towards a totalitarian society. Just from the other side of the political spectrum. That's all. Well, the point here, the reason I wandered down that path is, Hillary, of course, she's been given a pass by the media, and the political party, the Democrat Party, wants to pretend like it wasn't her fault, there was nothing she could do. But they go one step further with Barack Obama. Again, he was just the president. How was he supposed to know these things were going on? And again, he gets a pass on everything from Fast and Furious to the IRS targeting to the NSA collecting all this data that was never going to be. In fact, Obama had lied about the fact that it did not happen and would never happen under his presidency. He said that. He's caught lying about if you like your plan, you can keep your plan when it came to Obamacare. He knew that the YouTube video had nothing to do with the Benghazi attacks. He knew it. The memos, the emails, they're all out. They all knew. He knew it was a planned terrorist attack. He, again, knowingly lied to the American people. Oh, but you see, the IRS targeting conservative groups, Tea Parties. You see, all of that, that's just phony scandals. His words. Just phony scandals. But here's Chris Christie, a man who isn't quite conservative enough for me. In fact, he's for illegal aliens in his state getting in-state tuition costs. Essentially a state form of the DREAM Act that was instituted by executive fiat, which also is illegal, should be stopped immediately. Don't wait for the courts. But all these are phony scandals. Chris Christie, who's for stronger gun control. Again, gun control, and as the Democrats see it, not a good thing. Gun control, as I see it, means you use both hands. That's a good thing. Should help improve your aim. Unless, of course, you have a very small firearm, which some women do. And actually, there's nothing wrong with a guy having a smaller firearm if you're going to be more accurate with it. Whatever. Your gun, your business. It goes along with that libertarian streak. I don't see a small gun as being less manly. All I want from you is respect for the firearm and responsible use, care, and keeping of your firearm. You do that, I think every state in the union should be open carry, and you shouldn't have to have a permit to do it. According to the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, every American has the right to, and no government level has the authority to abridge that right in any fashion. You don't give me the militia argument, because again, when you look at what the framers considered the militia to be, then you would know that that's a false argument. Now, again, most of the folks making that argument do know that it's a false argument, but they count on you not to know that it's a false argument. See, the framers, the founding fathers, they didn't believe in having a standing army. They thought that was a threat, because they were afraid eventually a tyrannical leader would use that standing army, or the military would just flat out have a coup at some point and take over for themselves. Some general get high enough up the food chain and decide that he's going to give orders, and the people who are supposed to follow those orders, not knowing any better, go ahead and actually follow those orders. So the founding fathers believed that the militia was everybody who was of a reasonable age, so that they could come out and fight and stand up against tyranny if need be. That is what they meant when they said in order to regulate, in order to have a well-regulated militia. It's a false argument. Don't fall for it. And besides that, that's just a preamble. And the standing legal opinion has been since the beginning that while a preamble is an important address to the purpose of the statement, amendment, or law, that technically the preamble is not actually part of it. Therefore, it cannot be used as an argument for or against enforcement thereof or enactment against said law, amendment, etc. Now that's a legal argument that does hold water. At any rate, we've got all this going on, and of course the media just loves to give Obama a pass and ignore this, although I do have to give kudos to CNN here recently. CNN has been better. They've had a few random acts of journalism, and I've got to give them props for challenging the status quo, so to speak. In fact, in an interview I saw with the ever delightful Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she made the attempt to just lambaste Christie, and the reporter doing the interview, unfortunately I don't recall his name right offhand, and I don't have it in front of me, but you can find it on YouTube and all over the internet right now if you want to just look up various conservative sites. In fact, there's a link to it. You can probably find it at CNN. I have a link to it over at Tap Into the Truth Facebook page if you want to go that route. I will probably be uploading and embedding that video onto the website at some point in the very near future, but I have not had time to do that as of yet. So it is not there now, but I will most likely have it up there before the weekend is over. He asked point blank, Debbie Watcherman Schultz. She's such a lovely lady, by the way. Ask her point blank, couldn't people see this as being kind of the same thing as what's went on with the president when it's come to these many different... Well, I forget how he phrased it at first. He didn't use the word scandal at first, because the word scandal came up a little later. But he said, couldn't people look at it and say this is the same thing with the president when it comes to things like Benghazi and the IRS scandals and things like that? And Debbie Watcherman Schultz comes out and says, no. It's completely ridiculous because those are policy issues. This is a scandal. Well, the reporter didn't stop there. He was like, well, okay, but technically, I know you want to say that it's simply a policy issue, but couldn't people see these things as being scandals too? Oh no, it is completely moronic to try and say that this is a scandal. These are all policy issues. Benghazi, the IRS, the NSA, all policy issues. That has nothing to do with a scandal. What? Sorry, I interjected that part. She literally tried to do it. But the CNN reporter, still, he wouldn't back up off that point, and he didn't let her off the hook there. He stayed professional and polite. But he made it very clear that she was being hypocritical. I like how he managed to do it, though, is, he just let her say what she had to say. She showed how asinine she is, and basically the whole position of the entire Democratic Party, because the DNC launched a email campaign, the likes of which we haven't seen since Barack Obama was running for president. In a way to just try to attack Chris Christie. When Christie says he didn't know about this happening, this going on, oh no, these emails go directly to his office. There's no way he didn't know. Well, the stuff from the IRS scandal went directly to the president's office. So why should we believe him when he says he didn't know anything about it? Well, first I heard about it. It was on the news. Really? Mr. Occupier? Really? You have an attorney general who should be facing federal charges for gun walking. It's called Fast and Furious. Look it up sometime. But instead of that, he's going to ignore real crimes, and he's going to dedicate the next large amount of time and space and the efforts of his offices to help push same-sex marriage. Make sure that their civil liberties aren't being violated. This again is why the states' right issues are very important to be had now, because again, marriage is a states' right issue. The feds can pass any law they want to on the matter. The Supreme Court ultimately is going to have to come down and eventually say, according to the Constitution, this is up to the states. The federal government doesn't have standing to pass a law like this or to challenge a law like this. Problem is, too many activist judges want to push an agenda and ignore the law and ignore the Constitution far too often. That's got to change. So here we are. Chris Christie. There's no question at this point that the law was broken, and there probably will be lawsuits filed. In fact, I believe that there's already been a class action lawsuit filed on behalf of residents of the town directly affected. Christie, during the course of this 2-hour plus press conference that he had, he took responsibility and he took action. He fired his chief of staff and then let go his chief political advisor who had run his campaign. He stepped up and did what any good, or actually what any chief executive should do. A lot of folks don't believe, however, that he didn't have knowledge, that he wasn't in on it, that he didn't in some way sanction this. I don't know if that's the case or not. I certainly believe anybody who's going to play politics in Jersey, New York, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, if you're going to raise to the level of mayor, you've got to learn how to play the game. And unfortunately, the game is brutal. It's mean. It's evil. It's petty. It's spiteful. It's vengeful. And that's how politics is done in the big city. So, would Chris Christie be capable of this? I would hope not. Not that I wouldn't think he would be capable of it on strictly, hey, who are you doing kind of deal. But I would hope that his conscience would stand in the way. This guy's supposed to be a straight shooter. I'm no Christie fan. I've already mentioned he's not conservative enough for my taste. He's got this New Jersey version of the DREAM Act, and he's for gun control, and he's way too chummy with Obama since the whole Hurricane Sandy thing. Now, unlike a lot of conservatives, I didn't really find too much fault in him going to the federal government and trying to get the aid. He's governor of the state. His job is to get as much help for his people as he can for rebuilding. Now, whether you like the federal government offering that aid, that's a completely different story. But as long as that aid is made available, then Chris Christie would not have been doing his job to not go after it. But that's just done by filling out paperwork and maybe having a phone call or two. There's no need to go walking on the beach practically hand in hand and being all chummy and, I'm not saying be adversarial, but you had to know it was going to hurt your conservative cred to be seen being too chummy in photo ops right before the election. You had to know. You did it anyway. What's up with that? Now, there's two different takes on whether or not the press conference was too long. I've heard a lot of people say, yes, it was too long, and I'm in that camp myself. But I've heard other people say he gave everybody an opportunity to ask questions. He wasn't ducking anything. That lets him set out. Well, I can see that, okay? I'll concede that there's some validity to that point, but I still think this works much better for him as far as the political side goes. If he comes out, makes a statement, hey, this happened, we've addressed it, I've fired people, we've done what it is, I should have had a better idea of what was going on, I failed you there, I'm sorry, now I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I've got to get back to the job of running the state. That's it, we're moving on. Maybe take one or two questions, no more than that, and then get out of Dodge. Go back to the job of running the state. I think that would have been a far better way of handling the situation. But Christie's issues go deeper than that. the most appalling thing still comes back to how the media is covering this. Completely nuts. And this still just comes down to inconvenient traffic. Now the Democrats want to go on and on, especially Debbie Wasserman Schultz in particular. This impeded first responders in the search for a 4-year-old that was lost at the time. And people had panic attacks. I heard an interview where some lady was talking about how she had a panic attack because she was going to be late for work. Traffic jams happen in these areas all the time. That bad? No. But they do happen. So are you having a panic attack every time you're going to be late for work? Or just the times that it's provably someone else's fault? Just ask it out loud. It's all about the attack. Everybody's saying, no, your career's over. This is done. You can't continue in politics. And I'm kind of torn on trying to decide if this really is the media trying to destroy a candidate that has shown in the polls to this point. You know how they love the polls. The only polls that matter are the ones that get counted after the polls close on election day. But the media has made poll watching, and the Democrats in particular have made poll watching the heart of politics. Should not have, but that's where they're at. The long and the short of that situation still comes back to the simple fact that Christie is the only candidate put out in a generic form of these polls that is seen more favorable than Hillary Clinton. So is the media trying to destroy his candidacy now so that they'll have somebody that they think Hillary can outpoll? Because they think that would ensure victory. Because whether or not they're going to get behind Hillary now or later, they figure if they've got somebody that Hillary can't beat, but someone else comes along in the Democratic primary and is able to beat Hillary, then surely they'd be able to beat whoever Hillary could beat. So, that's the way they look at it. So are they trying to destroy Christie now? Or he was to this point a media darling. He'd been very helpful to the agenda. I still think the press would love for the Republicans to nominate Chris Christie. So could this be a way to try and gain sympathy for Christie among a conservative base who would have been far more likely to support a different candidate? Given how early this attack took place, it seemed orchestrated. Didn't seem particularly organic. Rush Limbaugh even made a statement today. I was reading an article. I didn't actually hear Rush's show today. It's a bit busy. But made a comment that something that Christie said in the news conference, talking about hadn't been able to sleep for 2 days. But according to his press conference, he had only known for about a day. So how is it you were losing sleep for 2 days over something that you'd only known about for 1 day? That's kind of a credibility issue there, I think. But I think the media wants to attack now so that they can get this out of the way and so they can try and get the sympathy support back in place. Hopefully it won't work. Christie is not the best candidate that can be put forth. I don't care if you're trying to win over the independents or not. Christie is not the guy the Republicans should be nominating. But then in truth, the last two nominees were not the best guys out of the group of people that were available. I can easily think of candidates that would have been far better chief executives. Whether you want to talk about Herman Cain, or whether you want to talk about Ron Paul, or whether you want to talk about Fred Thomas, former senator from the state of Tennessee, better known as a Hollywood actor, currently doing a lot of reverse mortgage commercials. The point still comes back to the fact that Chris Christie, he is responsible, and he should take responsibility, and it should be more than just firing two people. One of the things that bothered me about this press conference is I heard him say that he fired the one person because she had lied to him. Now, that, of course, is understandable and acceptable. That part alone doesn't concern me. The part that concerns me is he never once went so far as to say that he fired her because she had actually closed down these lanes of traffic, creating the traffic jams. The strong-arm tactic, the effort at retribution to someone that didn't support the re-election campaign, that's not what got her fired. It was lying to him that got her fired. Good chief executive takes swift action. He found the person that he felt was the most responsible outside of himself, and he terminated them, and then he offered an apology to the people. Seems like a reasonable course of action. I can get behind that. If it turns out that he did know more about it, then he needs to resign. He should not just leave it at firing them. He should resign. In fact, if he did know about it, he should just go ahead and come clean about that and resign. So at this point, if it turns out he knew more about it, then it's going to be uncovered, and that means that he's now lied, and he is tainted goods, and he should be washed away forever. But should this disqualify him, if it really is a case of him just not knowing? I say, yeah, we hold him to the same standards we want to hold Barack Hussein Obama. You ask for this job, you need to do it. And these people don't just ask, they beg for these jobs. They run around, they campaign, they raise money, they spend tons of other people's money to try and win these positions, and then they fail to execute. Christie's been relatively effective for what he's tried to do. In the grand scheme of things, for the state of New Jersey, he's been a pretty good governor. Again, I'm not a fan, and I don't want to necessarily be taking up for him. But he should be held accountable for this just as much as the people that actually did it, if he didn't know. Because it is his job to know. Just the same as it is for Barack Hussein Obama and the things going on in his administration. The IRS is targeting his political enemies. Then, know about it or not, you're still accountable because you're still the boss. The Justice Department's gun-walking weapons into Mexico, into the hands of drug cartels, then you're still just as responsible even if you didn't know. The buck stops here. It wasn't just a silly cliche. It wasn't just something put on a plaque. It was an honest-to-goodness philosophy that said, hey, as the president, you are the ultimate chief executive. It is your role, your responsibility, your duty to make sure that you know what's going on. And if somebody is intentionally keeping you in the dark, then when you find out these truths, you take swift and immediate action. You don't wait for the press to find out. You don't wait for the American people to find out. You take it in front of them. They find out from you, and they find out that you've already fired people. Eric Holder should have been fired over Fast and Furious. He should have been fired before the American people found out about it. The fact that he is still the Attorney General is a far bigger scandal than the fact that there was privileged information and we discussed about and blah, blah, blah. The abuse of the office has been carrying forth with this guy so much and so often. It is nothing new. It wasn't even new then, and Fast and Furious was one of the first major scandals to roll up out of this administration. If you don't count the lack of an authenticated birth certificate. But we don't want to go down the birther route right now. Chris-Christie, not the best bet for the Republican Party. But if he honestly didn't know about this little bridge scandal, then fine. He's taken the appropriate actions and he should be allowed to move on. But for each and every media outlet and Democratic Party operative that wants to jump on this, well, that just shows the level of hypocrisy, because there is no way that a traffic jam raises to the level of Fast and Furious. There's no way that a traffic jam raises to the level of the IRS targeting conservative groups. There is no way that a traffic jam raises to the level of the NSA spying on every American citizen. There is no way that a traffic jam raises to the level of Benghazi. Now, I'm very thankful that most of the people reporting on the bridge scandal has been referring to it as Bridgegate. Because the initial reaction that these left-wing liberal rags started running with right at the beginning, they were trying to call it Bridgeghazi. Instantly trying to point out to the fact that this is a terrible scandal. Ooh. Of course, the reason they backed off of it is they found out that it only served to draw attention to Benghazi and the fact that they weren't getting any answers from that. So they changed that real quick. So on the one hand, I'm happy to hear the change, but on the other hand, maybe it would have been better if they hadn't. The hypocrisy of the media on how they reported this, it is beyond the pale. They want to ignore every single scandal that the occupier has perpetrated upon the American people. But they want to make this traffic jam, which, again, I don't mean to belittle it. It was wrong. It was petty. It was childish. It was a ridiculous abuse of authority and power. It should never happen, and it should never be acceptable. But it was still just a traffic jam. And it does not raise to the levels of these, according to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, policy issues. So just keep an eye on them. See how they continue to report. It's insane. It really is. Going to take another quick break, and then when we get back, we are going to discuss the Riverton, Wyoming situation. We'll be right back.
I'll stay
so we can talk about the things that we kept so safe. And I know that we won't let each other go, even through closing doors. And they don't will understand what we both know. We've seen bad and worse, and through the times where I've loved and you have tried, I've grown inside. Well, here and now I sit and I am learning fast. You love someone, but that won't make them love you back. Here and there you go, and it is getting bad. But don't you hold on, 'cause I can't get over that. And always I would say the deepest things remain. Fate stays surrounding every word you say, holding life on a string. We'll turn down, don't wanna hear you make a sound when that phone don't ring. Look out, 'cause even when they have the doubts, look at what we found. Well, I can't, it's too late to win you back. I've lost my chance. Here and now I sit and I am learning fast. You love someone, but that won't make them love you back. Well, here and there you go, and it is getting bad. But don't you hold on, 'cause I can't get over that. And always I would say the deepest things remain.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. This is Tap Into the Truth, and I am your host, Tim Tapp. Thanks for staying with us. I really, really do appreciate it, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. If you are willing to give up this much of your time to sit here and listen to what I have to say, it really does mean a lot to me. So thank you. I appreciate it. I usually save these kind of things towards later in the show because it doesn't take anything at all to hit the play button, listen to a few minutes, and move on. But if you've actually taken the time to sit here and listen to this, to try to get the news part of what I'm telling you, and then take my opinion part of it, and either agree with me or disagree with me, either way, at least you're thinking about it, and that is really the point of the show. The intro really does say it all. We take a look at the hypocrisy of the media, we look at the propaganda, we try and expose it, but more importantly, we try to challenge you to use your brain. I don't know if you've taken the time to go check out the Tap Into the Truth Facebook page yet or not, but if you do, you'll go over there and you'll find news articles. Some are completely legit, some of them are outrageous. I'll comment on some of them, others I'll just post the news stories, but some of them are completely bogus, and I know they are, and I'm looking for you guys to give pushback so that I know that not only are you out there and that you're paying attention, but that you've done enough research that you know, hey, that's crap. Dude, you know that's not right. Don't you? That's what I like. That's what I love. That's what it's after. Because ultimately, if we don't start using our brains and start thinking, start understanding that we all have more in common than we have different, and understand that we, as Americans, all have a vested interest in making sure that our government does not lose touch with our Constitution, and that our individual liberties are at stake each and every time that we cede some level of power or authority to this federal government that they should not have. And it's not a matter of, well, it's just, this would be good for people. It's not a matter of, well, this would make things easier, more convenient. It's a case of, can it be abused? If you let the government do this, can it be abused? Even if it wouldn't be by the current crop of folks that are putting it in place, what about the next folks coming in after? And it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum you happen to be on, you should never give some level of authority, some level of power to a government that you would not feel 100% comfortable with the other guys being in charge and having that same authority. The hypocrisy needs to end, and everyone needs to understand that we are focusing on what's best for America. Which leads me to the question of what on earth is going on in Riverton, Wyoming, and how could that possibly be good for America? Well, what's actually happening can't be. In case you haven't heard, though, and it wouldn't surprise me because this really hasn't been very well covered by the alphabet soup media either, but I mean, ultimately, here's the question. Have you heard about the story of the residents in Riverton, Wyoming? See, one day, they were Wyomingans. I think that's the proper term. If you're from Wyoming and that's not the proper term, just let me know and I'll correct it. But you see, one day they were Wyomingans, whatever the proper term is. I'm sorry, it's what you get for having a unique sounding state. But the problem is that the very next, they were members of the Wind Rivers tribe. Or technically they were just living on the Wind Rivers tribe's land. See, after the Environmental Protection Agency declared the town part of the Wind Rivers Indian Reservation, undoing a 1905 law passed by Congress and, of course, angering state officials. The surprise decision was made by officials of the EPA, the Department of the Interior, and the Department of Justice early last month, and has invoked the ire of Governor Matt Mead, who has vowed not to honor the agency's decision and is preparing to fight in court. Quoted as saying, "My deep concern is about an administrative agency of the federal government altering a state's boundary and going against over 100 years of history and law." Mead also said in the same statement, this should be a concern to all citizens because if the EPA can unilaterally take land away from a state, where will it stop? See, the EPA declared that Riverton was part of the Wind River Indian Reservation after granting a treatment as a state application from the northern Aparaho and eastern Shoshone tribes. The tribes submit such applications to get funding for air quality monitoring under the Clean Air Act. However, this seemingly innocuous application ended up undoing the tribal boundaries set by a 1905 congressional act. The EPA granted the tribe's claim that the Wind Rivers Reservation extended over 1 million acres of land beyond what the 1905 congressional act established. By doing this, the agency effectively overruled an act of Congress. The worry by state officials is that turning Riverton, a town of over 10,000 people, over to the tribes will come with a slew of tax and law enforcement complications. Since Riverton is now part of the Wind River Reservation, it is technically no longer eligible for state services and no longer falls under the local law enforcement. Now, Meade, the governor, has ordered that the state agencies conduct business as usual in regards to Riverton, meaning state services, law enforcement, and regulations will continue. Quote, "This is an alarming action when you have a federal agency step in and start to undo congressional acts that has really been our history for 108 years. With the stroke of a pen without talking to the biggest groups impacted." This was a quote from State Senator Leland Christensen. And Leland made this statement to the Daily Caller News Foundation. Also went on to say that that would be the city of Riverton and the state of Wyoming being the two biggest groups impacted. Now, according to Meade's office, the EPA's decision came as a surprise to him, and he only found out about it from the media, not the EPA itself. So no heads up for the governor. This comes after Meade wrote to the EPA Administrator, Gina McCarthy, last August, detailing his concerns about the implications of granting the tribe's request to effectively override the 1905 Act. Now, the tribes remained adamant that Riverton and the 1 million acres of land is theirs, arguing that state officials once supported such a conclusion, and tribal officials have criticized the governor's office for changing its tune on Riverton and the reservation's boundaries. In a statement, quote, "Now that the Interior Department and the EPA have issued their determinations, state officials have changed their tune, claiming to be outraged by the decision and suggesting that the federal government has no say in such matters." This coming from the Northern Aparo Business Council, and they wrote this in a letter to Meade, adding that the state's shift in rhetoric could hurt tribe-state relations. What a surprise. Now, the dispute has received little national attention as of yet, but the Wyoming congressional delegation has written the EPA on the issue. Quote, "The EPA's decision has, in effect, overturned a law that has been governing land and relationships for more than 100 years. This wrote by Wyoming Senators Mike Enzi and John Basiario, along with Representative Cynthia Loomis. Quote, "We are also very concerned about the political ramifications this decision could have for the tribes and the state of Wyoming." Now, the boundary dispute between Wyoming and the tribes has been going on for some time now. It arose from a 2009 tax case that the state urged the courts not to drop because of the implications of ruling on the boundary without the federal government and the Eastern Shoshone being involved in the case. That according to a report from the Casper Star Tribune. Quote, "We didn't have a fully binding decision," Deputy Attorney General Marty Henstrog said back in 2009. Quote, "We do in the state, but the state is then put in a position of having to rely on the federal government's view for its direction." Now, that doesn't sound right. At the end of the day, state lawyers acknowledge that this determination is a federal question and must be determined to a final point in the federal courts. That's what this EPA decision will allow all parties to do. State courts have heard at least 2 cases on the boundary in the last 3 decades. One in the 1980s, Wyoming Supreme Court case found that Riverton was part of the reservation, and another state high court case in 2008, which found that the town was in Wyoming. Geographically, it's hard to argue either case, I suppose. Are you in Wyoming? Yes. Are you on the reservation? Maybe. The only problem is that the state court's decision don't set a solid precedent, since neither case involves both tribes living on the reservation, nor the state and the federal government all at once. The EPA did not immediately respond to requests for comments. What a surprise. So, that's the deal. But what really comes out of this? What are we talking about? We are talking about the EPA, the Department of the Interior, getting together, and the Justice Department, oh, don't forget them, thank you, Mr. Eric Holder and company, getting together and deciding suddenly now that this town is part of the reservation. Now, I don't know if you're really aware of this. It was kind of touched on that article, but in essence, tribal reservations are considered by law and treaty to be outside of the purview of the United States. You can't actually be part of a state or part of the federal existence as part of a reservation. By rights, if this decision holds, it really does mean that the people living there are at the whim and the mercy of the tribal council that runs the reservation. They can be told to get out, forced to move, because they're not part of the tribe. I don't know that the Indians in question would do that, but ultimately the people living there would have no recourse. Homes that they have bought and paid for, communities that they have built up. Now, don't get me wrong, I get that Native Americans, as they PC demands they be called, I hate hyphenated Americanism, by the way, so I say that with a level of disdain not directed towards the fine, noble peoples, but at the fact that political correctness requires them be hyphenated. Anyway, the American Indian has had a pretty crappy deal. You want to complain about slavery? You want to complain about internment during World War II? You want to complain about all these terrible things, which all were bad, horrible. Again, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to diminish any of those. But the atrocities committed against peoples have not been equaled in American history than to how the American Indians have been treated. No one's been treated worse. No one. We've got a pretty raw deal. But ultimately, I think the issue here is what gives the EPA or the Department of the Interior the authority to make this decision. These boundaries were set by an act of Congress. Now, the only reason that this is a federal issue and not a states' right issue, which ordinarily I'd say this would fall directly into that category too. This should be a states' right thing. But the only reason it doesn't is because technically this is a treaty with a foreign group. Which is also what makes the Native American hyphenated thing kind of ironic. Because our federal government doesn't consider them to be citizens of this nation. American Indians have never been considered American. Geographically, they're in America, but by rights, they're considered to have their own nation. And since treaties of that nature have to be run by the federal government, then it is a federal issue. The state actually has very little say in the matter, but the federal government had their say. They passed this law. Congress decided, and it was put in effect. Now, the two tribes in question, did they get a raw deal again? Well, it's certainly possible. In fact, I would say, given the time frame involved here, it's almost likely. But does that make it okay for three executive branch agencies to get together and decide, well, this is what we're going to do? Because number one, I don't see where the EPA has any authority to make this decree anyway. And it seems like, from everywhere I've read on this particular story, this is the doing of the EPA. Now, the Interior Department is the group that should be handling the American Indian affairs. You know, that's their deal. That's practically, I don't know why I'm even saying practically, that is why the Interior Department was founded, was to deal with the indigenous peoples as we expanded further and further west. You know, we started in the east and we kept moving these folks further west, and then once we got all the way to as far west as we could go, then we started trying to circle them up in little groups, put them on reservations. Believe me, nobody's been treated crappier in the history of America than these people. And there's some folks that have been treated pretty damn bad. I mean, I love America. I think it's the greatest nation in the world. I do. But we do have a checkered past. The important thing is to learn from it. We can't just wear blinders all the time and pretend like everything was hunky-dory and everybody always did the right thing, because guess what? We didn't. I'm not making apologies. I think it led us to be the nation we are today. But I'm also not making excuses. I'm not going to shrug off. I'm not going to hide from the facts. And I don't think anybody should. I think we should admit it and move on. Yeah, we did this. That was bad. We shouldn't have done it. And let's try to make things right. I don't understand why these tribes are so adamant about this reservation stuff. Why don't you come into the fold? Come off the reservations and become full-on American citizens and engage in American society. That would be the best solution there. No more need to worry about the boundaries of a reservation. Let's get rid of the reservation. Let's make it another town in the state of Wyoming. Do the same thing at the other reservations across the country. And let's just stop all this different nation nonsense. Again, I'm not saying you may force them to give up their cultures or any nasty, evil accusation that's going to come from the tree huggers on this one, but what I am saying is there's no reason why you should be separate from us. You should enjoy the benefits of living in this great nation. You've certainly had to deal with what the worst that America has to offer. You should be able to benefit and reap the benefits of what the best we have to offer. So, that's it. You lay it out there. That's the issue. They've been treated badly. So I don't blame them for wanting what they thought should have been theirs. But I do not see how any of those agencies have the right to act unilaterally to undo an act of Congress. They don't have the constitutional authority. In fact, the EPA doesn't have any real authority anyway. Everybody sits back and they get a fine and they pay the fine because they think there's this authority, but in truth, what is the source of that authority? They are an executive branch agency that's been tasked with inspecting. But Congress has never authorized them any specific powers to operate under their authority. And guess what? It's up to Congress to do that. The executive branch alone doesn't have it. The EPA does not have the power to override Congress. Period. End of discussion. The president doesn't have the power to override Congress. They can pass a law, the president can veto that law, but guess what? Congress can still come around and override the veto if they're so inclined. It doesn't happen very often, but it can. Congress is who has the lion's share of power when it comes to the federal government. And it was that way on purpose because Congress is where the representatives of the people in the House and of the states in the Senate, although they haven't represented their states in some time, that's where the real power comes from. And that's the way it was designed. They were going to have the lion's share. Controlling the purse strings over in the House, controlling the approval of appointees to cabinet level positions in the Senate. Why do those folks have to approve them before the president can have his pick of appointees? Because it's still got to be the representatives of the people and of the states that have the loudest voice when it comes to our federal government, because that's what our federal government's supposed to be serving. There are those out there that are claiming that this is actually an act of war by our own government against the state of Wyoming. Obama's EPA takes an entire American town away from Wyoming and gives it to the Indians, altering the state's boundary and going against over 100 years of history and law. This is how it's being written up in The Free Patriot. Obama's EPA has declared that the city of Riverton, Wyoming, with over 10,000 people, is no longer part of the United States and have given it to the Indians. In essence, all Americans living in Riverton are no longer living in the United States and are not eligible for state or federal services. They can also be tossed off land that they bought and paid for, since their deeds do not have to be recognized by the folks that run the reservation. The Indians have argued for years that they should get full ownership of 1 million more acres of land because it should be part of their reservation. The problem is that Congress decided the borders in legislation passed in 1905. If this ruling is allowed to stand, the EPA can arbitrarily take land from its owners and give it to anybody they choose. After that, this article gets extremely redundant compared to the article that I've already read to you. But it's a far more aggressive take. They're legitimately calling it an act of war. I'd love to know what you think about this. I'll tell you what I think. I think the Indians have had a raw deal for a long time, but that doesn't make it okay for the federal government to overstep its bounds, use extra constitutional powers, and try to make accommodations for one group that may have been screwed over in the past by virtue of screwing over a bunch of people that had nothing to do with that. People living there in this town were not the people that were involved in the decision that made these boundaries. But the EPA has no power to overrule Congress, and the Department of the Interior has no power to overrule Congress when it comes to this kind of issue. They would be the only one of the three, the Justice Department, the EPA, and the Interior Department. The Interior Department is the only one of those three that would have standing to go to court and challenge Congress on this and force some type of readjustment to the law. But the EPA doesn't have that power. They don't have that authority. They don't have the standing. And they certainly don't have the legal authority to just take the town away from the state and hand it over. So I say kudos to Governor Meade and his insistence in ignoring this particular order, because the EPA doesn't have that authority. If they want to take it to federal court, then fine. And this is probably the excuse to try and do that. Watch out for this to end up in front of an activist judge. Watch out for the EPA and the Obama White House to try and push this under the rug and into the court and in front of the judge that they want to hear this case. I mean, really, this, to me, as silly as it sounds, and I'm not trying to make light of it, I'm really not, but since Obama and company couldn't get the owner of the Washington Redskins to change the name of the football team, this was probably the next best thing. This is how they're making up for that. I wouldn't doubt it if that's not part of this, because these people are that stupid. They think that they're helping. They think that they're doing some great thing, and they're just so awesome because they're always watching out for the little guy. What about the little guy that's worked hard all their life to buy a home in this town? What about the city government that's duly elected and has been working hard to try and keep the infrastructure up? And what about the state of Wyoming itself that's gonna, if this is allowed to stand, gonna lose the tax revenue and the viability that comes from those 10,000 residents? Are they all gonna have to leave? I mean, these two tribes at this point haven't made any indication that they're planning on kicking anybody off the land. But obviously the people living in town aren't part of the tribes. And obviously you don't want to make a hastened jump ahead of time, because you don't know how things are going to play out when it comes time for that. So ultimately, what is going to happen here? I can tell you what should happen, and that is the federal court should step in and side with the state of Wyoming and tell them point blank that Congress had settled this over 100 years ago, and the EPA doesn't have the power or authority to even get involved, nor do they have standing with the court to bring the suit. Again, that's, I think, the only reason why the Interior Department was involved with this. The Justice Department, wanting to look like they're providing social justice for the American Indians in question, knew that the issue of standing to challenge in court would probably come up, because that's been the excuse for the Supreme Court to ignore the eligibility issue for Barack Obama and whether or not he's eligible to hold the office of president. In fact, the Supreme Court has dodged a lot of things they haven't wanted to touch lately under the technicality of standing. You do not have standing to bring this case to court. You have not suffered injury from it. So now, I guess, since I've very skillfully planted all the different code words of standing and states' rights into each and every one of these stories, you now see the common thread they all had together. And again, no ill will towards the tribes involved here. I think American Indians have gotten a pretty crappy deal from start to finish. I think they're very noble people, and that they were abused, and that they have been treated horribly by the United States government during the time of our expansion during the Manifest Destiny days. But that doesn't justify the EPA trying to make another power grab, because that's what this comes down to. They're going to hide behind the ideology of social justice, which is really just a code word for redistribution and socialism. Understand, there is no justice involved in social justice. It's the idea that suddenly it's okay for you to get retribution against those that have kept you down. And the definition of who's been keeping you down can be modified wildly while you're seeking your social justice. If this land was supposed to belong to this reservation, then Congress should have done it back when they passed this law initially, defining the boundaries. The failure was then. And the only way to continue to go back and try to redress this thing is to do it properly. And the EPA, the Justice Department, and even the Interior Department, simply through fiat, does not have the authority to mandate that. They simply do not. It is insane for this to even be happening in the United States of America. There are other ways to make retribution if there was a legitimate mistake in drawing up those borders. Period. Much better ways. But to go in and take the entire town of Riverton, Wyoming, from the state of Wyoming and say now it is part of the reservation, well, that's going pretty far off the reservation, if you follow my meaning. This can't be allowed to stand. Only because the EPA cannot have a precedent set that would allow for them to be able to take property away from anybody they choose at any point in time and just give it to anybody else. That is the threat here. It is a government power grab. One that is not constitutional and one that cannot be permitted. All apologies to the tribes. My beef with this story has nothing to do with you. My beef with the fact that this is happening is with the fact that this government agency does not have the authority to make you the promise that you now suddenly can have this town. They don't have that power. Governor Meade, stay on this fight. From this podium, from this broadcast, I will be with you. I am going to inform as many people as I can about this through the show, through the website, and through public speaking engagements, and I am going to try to get other media types that I have relationships with to bring this to the national spotlight as well. You are not in this fight alone. And this fight is not against the American Indian tribes in question here. This fight is against the EPA and their desire to destroy the Constitution, destroy the authority of Congress. They can't be allowed to do it, and I have got to end this show. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, for those of you that listen to the end, thank you. I'm going to take one more quick break, and then we'll be back. Stay with us.
Turned out
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. Got to just close out the show at this point, but I wanted to go ahead and send out special thanks again to News Guy here at Spreaker. Really appreciate you taking the time to check out the website and contacting me about the technical error. I know I've mentioned it before, but I really do appreciate it. Want to remind everybody to check out Tap Into the Truth over at blogtalkradio.com Sunday. We're going to be having Brenda Leonard on in the first hour, and then in the second hour, Diane Sori is going to be on. And if you're not reading Diane Sori's op-ed pieces, you should be. Just that simple. Please go ahead and check out tapintothetruth.com. Check out the Facebook page for the show. Be sure to like the page, please. I am asking nicely. Also, go ahead and follow the show, please, over at Twitter. I think you'll like most of the tweets. Of course, usually these days I haven't had a whole lot of tweet time, so I've mostly just been tweeting links to various shows, and that's about all I've had time to do. But at any rate, check us out. Follow, like, all that wonderful stuff. Social media is another way we can help spread the message. If you like what you're hearing, if you're taking the time to listen to the show, share it with your friends. If you think I'm a big joke and you think I'm funny and you want to poke fun at me and share that with your friends, then please go ahead, share it with your friends. Have them laugh at me all you want, but be careful, because I might infect one or two of them with that nasty little contagion known as conservative ideology and a belief in personal liberty. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I need for you to understand that I do not want you to take my word for it. But please, please don't take their word for it. Always be prepared to do your own research, use your brain, and be prepared to work just a little bit harder if you want to tap into the truth. Thanks for listening. That's it for tonight, everybody, and we will be back again, like I said, Sunday over at Blog Talk, and then we'll be back right here Monday doing this thing live. Thanks a bunch. Have a great weekend, everybody.
I've been watching, begging from the front door, like lightning striking near twice before. We were so young, so we didn't really know how it feels to really have to let go. We went throwbacks, laughing while I relapsed. Well, these drinks are going down too fast. We were in touch, but it was not enough. We were sober, but she had me love drunk. So this is goodbye. I hope all the stars they shine wherever you will go after tonight. So this is our one life. Try my best to make it right. I promise you that I will always wanna fight. Always wanna fight. Don't you forget everything that we had. All the good was better till it went bad. You know me better than anything, so I bet you saw this coming. We were laughing, thinking about old times, like a first kiss when I finally called you mine. We were like, wait, everything is gonna change. Hope when I come back you know my name. I don't think I can say all I need to say, with the time left counting down by